Welcome to Beyond the School Gate. For those of you who are new around here, my name is Ruth, and this podcast aims to share the varied experiences of women in leadership, to talk about what we do beyond the school gate, the good, the bad, and the funny. So welcome, Carley, to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So I always like to start the guest episodes by asking the guest how we know each other.
Well, I feel like we've only just met each other, kind of. Like, we've just moved to a different stage of our relationship. But the first stage, obviously, was when you come and worked at the NGO that I was also working at. I was... I feel like moving further into my leadership journey, moving into a senior leadership role, and I just remember you coming in and just being so different to any female leader that I had worked with before, actually. And you wouldn't know this, but I've taken so much from that. You come in and you just sat and you listened and you took the time to get to know everybody, and you were just so warm and kind, and I thought, this person is someone that I'm going to learn some things from.
Oh, that's so nice.
And I think we worked together for about 2 years, and I was lucky enough to have a promotion and to work directly under you. And I did just learn so much from you, Ruth, and I would say that you're a major reason of why I'm the leader I am today. So
that's so kind. Thank you. And likewise, I think my style is definitely sit back, initially observe and build those relationships, and I think that learning happens both ways, doesn't it? I'd often watch you with your team and how you navigate some of those challenging conversations, and I'd be like, oh, I'll put that bit in my toolbox, I'll use that. So. So let's jump straight into it. So when I think of you, I think smart, approachable, passionate, caring, and most of all, I think mental health and passionate about a woman's voice. So can you share with us where your commitment to mental health advocacy has come from?
Yes. First, when you had told me you were going to say that about me, I thought, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be amazing if we just spoke about each other like that all the time?
Wouldn't it?
We tend to not, and I'm not sure why we do that as women. We should really be bringing each other up, but thank you anyway for saying those lovely things about me. I think in terms of advocacy for mental health really has been intimately intertwined with some of my earliest memories, actually. We will probably talk about this later, but I've suffered with mental illness myself, and I've certainly seen that in my parents, most significantly with my father. And I guess just that personal experience of seeing how mental health can impact the entire trajectory of your life, and not just you as a person that's suffering, but of all your choices, of all the things that you're doing, and not only the relationships you have with people around you, but the impact it has on those people as well, and how sometimes you can become your mental health or your mental illness in a way. And I think I don't really remember as such when I become an advocate for that, but I think just having observed that in the people that I cared most about, and knowing that not everybody had the courage, the voice, the capacity to kind of do that, I just felt like I had a calling to do that. And I think in different ways throughout both my personal history and my career, I've done that in different ways for different people. I guess the other thing is, most recently, and I was quite surprised to see this was increasing, but in other ways not increasing. Out of 2 in 5 Australians now say that they have suffered with a mental illness at some point of their life, and more like, I guess a little bit longer ago, that was one in 5, and so now that's 2 in 5, and so we're seeing it increase more and more. And I guess you just need more people out there talking about it. And I think one of the important things in my roles in the NGO sector is really reducing the stigma, because I think if we're talking about it, if we're normalizing it, if we're thinking about mental health days, if we're thinking about suffering with anxiety the same as suffering with a broken limb, then people aren't going to be afraid to talk about it anymore, and they might reach out for help, they might speak to somebody about it, and they might not get to the point where they are their mental illness.
I really like that, because I think if you were to break your leg, I'd send you a card, or I'd send you some flowers, or I'd be like, hey, do you want me to nip to the shops and get some groceries for you, because you're in pain. And I suppose it's the same thing, isn't it, with your mental health, is how do we help each other and look out for each other?
And I think I know this is mostly about women, this podcast, which I love, but I think particularly, you know, young boys, you know, if we were talking about that more with children and boys in particular, there wouldn't be this silence and this stigma around mental illness.
So you mentioned in your introduction, I introduced that you came from a blended family, you were the oldest, and I think we learned so much of who we become as adults stems from our formative years. So can you tell me a little bit, you touched on kind of your parents' mental health and at times your own mental health. Can you just share with us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, sure. So I have 2 biological siblings. They're 3 years younger than me, and they are twins, which is fun.
That's so cool.
Very, very different.
Yeah, okay.
I think my parents separated when I was about 7. I think before that time, while there was a lot of care to kind of have a happy family unit, there was a lot of fighting and a lot of tension at home. And I remember very early almost distracting my younger brother and sister and sort of playing games when things were getting a bit yuck with my parents. And so I think kind of protecting them a little bit really has governed who I am as a person in terms of wanting to lead and advocate for others and that sort of thing, and yeah, not necessarily letting them know exactly what was going on at home. It was quite difficult though, I think. When my parents separated, still there was a lot of sadness around that. But it really made my siblings and I quite close. I suppose as it happens, we're living across 2 different households and having, you know, shared custody with mum and dad. It kind of makes you really look inside yourself in terms of who you are, because I guess at times you maybe don't feel like you're part of it either family unit. And so I think having a brother and sister go through that journey with me really brought us closer together, which was really lovely. I think that feeling of displacement, maybe I might call it, affected each of us in different ways. But for me, it definitely made me very studious. I think I really wanted to make both of my parents proud in terms of maybe not always being with one of them at whatever point in time. And so that was that. I guess I turned to that. Eventually, both of my parents remarried, and their partners brought 2 extra children into the family.
So like 1 on each side?
No, 2 on each side.
Oh wow!
So I was part of two blended families with 5 children on both sides. Yeah, it's very difficult to draw on a genogram. At times is really, really good, but also really challenging, as you can imagine. There's a lot of personalities, a lot of arguments, but a lot of really good times as well on both sides. I guess in terms of what that was like, it was just really busy. You know? And as I sort of touched on already, I think it really made me kind of think about who I was and what my place in the family was, and just really needing to vocalize the needs, because there's all these sports going on. We were a very big musical family, so there was all these music appointments at Stedfords and all these sorts of things, and so you had to really say it how it was and ask for what you needed to be able to get those needs met. So, you know, some people might call me a bit bossy.
Look, I think that the word bossy, I have a love-hate relationship with it. Again, this is not a male-hating podcast, but I grew up with 4 older brothers, so I was family of 5, but I was the youngest and the only girl, and when I was assertive and clear and asked for what I want, I was bossy. My brothers could demonstrate the same behaviours, and the B word was never used. So it's an interesting word. I have a love-hate relationship with it.
Because it's almost like strong woman versus bossy, given the context. Interesting. I guess I couldn't talk about my childhood without talking about my high school experience. I think I really found myself on the stage. So I was a singer.
That's
I wouldn't
amazing.
say that I sing anymore, but was in a few bands in high school, which was really fun. And I guess I just really solidified that confidence and that personification of bringing people together and making people happy while being on the stage, which is really nice. It really made me more confident as a person. I guess in high school I also came out as a lesbian, which was a huge pivotal moment for me.
What year were you in? What age group?
Year 10, I think. And being at a performing arts high school, that was actually a really positive experience.
Yeah, right.
Which was really nice. There was a lot of people in the Rainbow community at school. We had teachers that were great advocates. That was awesome. A really lovely community. But I guess this is a little bit past childhood, but it was quite surprising to me how that shifted after high school, actually.
Oh, really?
And the discrimination that sort of come with that, if I'm thinking the early 2000s, I suppose, in terms of, like name calling and not being, respected in different contexts. I remember one of my early career, places I worked, I had my boss kind of label me as, this is Carley and she's a lesbian.
You were kidding me.
It was like, no, so it was as if it was like, Carley has brown hair, she's a lesbian.
Oh my
a tick box.
gosh.
So yeah, I think crazy.
That's wild. Oh my god.
Yeah.
And that was the 2000s?
Not 2000s, but 2000s. As in between 2000 and 2010-ish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So not that long ago.
Not that long ago.
That's
when
wild.
I think about it. And I don't think I ever thought about being discriminated before that. And I think that also, whilst not necessarily mental health, there is a crossover, I guess, of coming out and potentially having an impact on your mental health. But that also started a fire within me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Actually, this isn't okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that. I feel like throughout this whole interview there's going to be so many nuggets.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's wild. I can see so much of what you've said in your leadership style. Like, literally, as you were talking like about the performing arts, I'm like, I can see you're so confident in public speaking. You're not afraid to put your hand up and say, give your opinion on something, or like you're just kind of like that front and center confidence. So as you were talking and giving some examples, like I've seen that at work. I've seen you do that in this situation. I've seen this. It's so cool that to hear that history. It's like, oh, that's how it kind of materializes now as an adult.
Yeah.
Like, that's so cool.
It is interesting. It's been interesting reflecting on it actually as well. Yeah.
First one in your family to go to university, to get not 1 but 2 degrees. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. And you touched on that a little bit just now, and you said it made you become a studious child. Can you tell us a little bit about your drive to go and get 2 degrees?
I didn't always intend to get 2, and I actually think the combination of psychology and business is quite a random one to a lot of people, but I don't actually think so.
Yeah, no, I can see.
So I guess both of my parents always pushed me, and I guess I could say I also have a really strong intrinsic reward system. I don't know, maybe you could say that come from that positive reinforcement from both of my parents when I was getting those sorts of grades, and eventually that kind of become more internal. But fun story, you would know that I have lots of shoes. I love a good high-heeled shoe. I love a good coloured shoe, very vibrant. In year 12 actually, when I was studying for my HSE, and before actually doing the HSE at the end of the year, I made a little deal with myself that every time I was to get an A, that I would buy myself a pair of shoes, and hence started the large shoe collection.
Oh, wow. I love that.
So that certainly continued on to university and certainly has got more expensive as I've
I can
bigger
imagine.
shoes.
Yeah. Can you remember the first pair of shoes that you bought with the first A?
Yeah, I do actually. It's they were these high-heel pair of shoes, and they were like a dark blue, like a satin material, and they had this beautiful like jewel, I guess, on the front.
Wow, I love that you can remember that.
Yeah, and I had, it was very funny actually, in my bedroom there was bookshelves, mainly of psychology books, and then another bookshelf with shoes.
I love it.
And I would say that's where my love of shoes started.
And you recently have moved in, will be moving into a director's role on Monday.
Yes.
So what have you treated yourself to?
Oh,
congratulate yourself on that. That's huge.
No, I haven't yet, because I guess it's nearly Christmas time, and I don't know, if I buy myself, a new pair of shoes, I don't know what Santa will bring me.
Oh, I like your style. Let's see what Santa brings first.
I have to see first.
Okay.
I guess, I don't know, knowledge is power, isn't it? And I think very early on, people were asking me advice on different things, or I was really getting into problem solving, whether it was interpersonal problems or whether it was things like saving water. I remember once counting the amount of drips there was at the tap in the bathroom per minute, and then multiplying that to a day. Just really getting all of those random facts. But in terms of psychology, I think it was really about trying to bring people together and kind of knowing what made people tick, and trying to bring out the best in people. And whilst I didn't go on to get my master's in psychology, I did work in the field as a behaviour analyst for quite a while, working with children and young people, particularly on the autism spectrum. And I guess after a couple of years, I just felt like my voice was bigger than this, and that I almost, as you said just before, kind of needed to bring a crowd and to stand centre and to be talking to a larger audience. And so I started developing training packages and doing that with lots of different stakeholders. And then, I made a few career moves and then thought, I think I need to complement this with some sort of leadership and management thing to try and get more backing and more knowledge behind my voice, rather than, whilst it is important sort of knowing what you feel and how that impacts different people, getting the managerial background. And so I moved into business administration, and I do kind of like to say that I feel like it's almost like a translator, actually. I've always led clinicians, and so often you find that clinicians they're definitely about empowering people and fixing these problems, and then you have executive management or even just management that are looking at the bottom line of the KPI and neither seem to understand each perspective, but both are equally important. And I feel like with the combination of degrees I have, I'm able to be...
Brings the two worlds together, doesn't it? I'm like, okay, I can see you in that finance meeting, doing that thing now, connecting the dots. Okay, so I like this question, and I keep looking over here. For those who are watching on YouTube, I keep looking over here because the question set is over here, so sorry if that's distracting. So, who are your role models globally in the space of leadership and women's voices?
I really love this question, actually, and it made me think, because there's just so many good ones. The first one has to be Jacinta Ardern. The tenderness that she brings to leadership and the kindness is just so empowering. And I think similarly to you, Ruth, actually, in your leadership style, both of you have taught me in different ways that you don't have to be firm, loud to be strong, and you can bring kindness to that. And I remember in supervision, actually, we had once, and you were talking to me about the way you sometimes interject to more, let's say, obtuse participants in meetings, and how you can do that with a softer voice. And I just really love that, and I think that's the same as Jacinta Ardern. You don't have to be loud to be firm. And look at the way she led New Zealand through COVID.
I know.
It's just incredible.
Phenomenal.
And she really just shows that you can have a family, that you can have a career, and you can do both really well. And I think she's also just so authentic, which is so important to me. I think not everyone loves Jacinta, but she just brings authenticity and caring and tenderness to her position. I think that's really important. And then my second one is a little bit random.
Okay.
But Audrey Hepburn.
Okay.
Yeah. Not only I think is she an amazing style icon, and I do take many things from her, but I really, I've read a lot about her, and I know that when she started her career earlier on, she was a very shy person, and she almost took on this persona in her acting, and eventually that grew her into the advocate that she was and the humanitarian she was for UNICEF. And I feel like that kind of happened for me on the stage as well, that originally I had to be somebody else up there singing, but eventually I was able to take that from the stage into leadership, talking at conferences and different things like that. And I think just the way she brings fun and lightness and positivity to the work that she did was just really empowering.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that connection.
And she has this same, like, I'm going to butcher it as well, but she has this beautiful quote that she's known for, which is something like, you know, you were given two hands, and one is for helping yourself and one is for helping others.
Oh, how nice.
And I just think that's so wonderful. And for me, that really ties into mental health as well, and your own self-care, sort of knowing what your strengths and vulnerabilities are, how to harness them so that you can help others, and really, I guess, embracing your own voice and your own experience to be able to use that to empower others, in particular women in leadership for me.
What happens in your head? Like, you're talking about, like, when you're on stage and being able to have a persona, like, what happens in your head and in that moment where you're like, I'm now becoming this person, I'm now, like, how do you make that switch?
I don't really know anymore.
Like, do you think it's something you're born with, or do you think it's something you learn, or?
I think I learnt it. I think certainly some other people maybe are born with it. I think for me, I started out quite shy, but I think then as my family kind of evolved and had to kind of advocate and be much louder, I think that happened. But I also love being competitive, actually, and I love to try and be the best. And
I see that.
And so I think that if I'm trying to remember my first performance at high school, and I think just stepping out there and knowing that you can bring people along for the ride, it is this shift where you're kind of like, okay, now I'm here and I have to be bigger, louder, and myself still, but you know, bigger movements, bigger facial expressions to bring people along for the ride, because if you are smaller, then people kind of can't see that. And I think I bring that to my leadership now as well, where it's like, you can believe in a mission or you can have your values, but if they're just sitting silently within you, how are you going to empower others to make a change? And so I think I've kind of brought that into my work as well.
I've not one creative bone in my body, so I'm so interested when I hear kind of how people use, I suppose, like, could be a hobby or like a skill in that space into like their day-to-day working life, because it's something that's so kind of, I suppose, far removed from my own reality. I'm just like, it's so interesting how like Beyonce's got her Sasha Fierce. I'm just like, but what does that mean? What does that look like? Like, it's pretty cool.
I think
to do that.
It's almost like, in my mind, it's almost like a caricature, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like, you know, I have the curly hair and big cheekbones, but my performing Carley has bigger hair. Brighter clothes.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
And I like the bright clothes and I like the bright shoes, because you always, that's one of the things I remember early on was your shoes. I think the first time I ever met you was when I was doing the Headspace stuff.
Yes.
When we were doing a joint tender together.
Yes.
And I think you had some really bright shoes, and I was like, I've never seen shoes like that. They're fantastic. So bright shoes. But it's, I don't know, it's a way of also like showing your personality, like especially in the environment we're in, and if we're in forums and stuff like that, there's a level of like same, isn't there? And sometimes those pops of colour or that kind of point of difference is, we're still peers, but here's my little bit of sparkle. You're welcome, world. This is probably, when I was putting the questions together, was one of my favourites. I love this question. If you could have a dinner party with 6 guests, they could be living or past, who would be around your table and why?
Well, the first person is Emma Watson. One, because my wife Claire would kill me if I didn't invite her.
Okay, fair enough.
Hypothetical or real. But I mean, Emma Watson is just amazing in terms of the advocacy that she does for women. I know she's working at the moment about, you know, making a huge difference in terms of girls and education, in terms of fair trade and all of those sorts of things, which are incredibly important to remove the barriers that we have as women. So she would be a must.
Number 1. Okay.
Number 2, I think, is probably quite controversial.
Drum roll.
So Sigmund Freud.
Okay.
Yeah, like I've just always been such a Freud fangirl. And I just think whilst a lot of his his psychological principles are really controversial and out there, particularly they are actually quite sexist, but given the context of which they were developed and just, I guess, the confidence of which he put them out there based on his own musings, I suppose. And the fact that we still look at the ego and the super ego so many years later is just incredible. It would be great to kind of speak with him about our interpretation of how we've brought that into the 21st century.
I love that.
Whether that's the same.
Yeah. Are we far off what you thought?
Yeah, exactly. Next one, Julia Gillard. I think.
Okay,
Yeah, I think she just has so much to teach us. And again, like Jacinta, she's just so unapologetically herself.
Yeah, I love that.
I know. And just the misogyny speech. I mean, who doesn't love that?
I know, right?
And
that's the first time I heard her name when I moved here, was somebody was like, have you heard this speech? And I was like, no, what? And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then people were using it as the timing to wash your hands during COVID.
Oh,
they were saying if you kind of recite the speech, that's the amount of time or something like that.
Okay.
I was like, oh, okay.
I didn't know that. That's great. And I think just being in Canberra, like near where that happened, it's just so special.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Plus, Julia does a lot of work for Beyond Blue. So next one is my paternal grandmother. She was just a boss. I lost her when I was quite young, actually, and I just feel like there was so much more that I could have learned from her.
Yeah, okay.
She loved a lemon tracksuit.
Oh!
Which, you know, I love that.
Now we're talking.
You know, matching top and bottom lemon tracksuit.
Oh, I love it.
Love it, no. But some of my earliest memories of her were her just taking us on these amazing bush walks and hikes, and she always picked a stick and took a plastic bag with her to pick up rubbish.
Oh,
and
I love it.
I know, and I just think there was so much I could have spoken with her about if I was a little bit older. But I mean, I got a lot from her as a young girl, but I think just being an adult, it would be really good to have some solid environmental conversations.
Yeah. How old were you when she passed?
I think like 14.
Yeah, okay.
So, you know, still kind of finding myself not really cool to hang out with your grandparents sort of situation.
Well, now it'll be awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Next one, Dalai Lama.
Okay,
yeah. It's pretty eclectic table.
Brilliant, I don't know what the discussion would be.
I think for him it would just be about kind of picking his brain in terms of really looking at the early intervention and setting the stage for positive mental health. I think it's so easy for us to think about meditation and mindfulness, but how can we embed that in Western society early on to set up children and young people for positive mental health moving forward? I think that would be just amazing to get to know that. Yeah.
Oh, that's my favourite so far of your list.
And then my last one is my greatest and longest best friend, Bianca. First of all, she makes everybody laugh all the time.
Okay,
she knows so many obscure facts, like how many dots are on a golf ball. I don't know how she knows that, but she just seems to know so many things. Okay. But also, she's just amazing. She's had so much trauma and poor health, and she has so much resilience and is so positive. And I couldn't meet any of these people without her.
Sounds like she'd know everything about something.
She would click with everyone.
Nice. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a couple of people on your list that would also be on Ahmed's list.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, cool.
Oh, cool. Huh. That means you're smart, because he's very smart. So that means you're smart. So we spoke briefly about, well, I think one of the things we've got in common is that we both lost a parent. As we talk about mental health and poor mental health, and you also touched early on men's mental health as well. If there were boys or men or non-binary individuals that were listening to the podcast, what would your key message be around men's mental health?
Yeah, I think just talking about it, and that, you know, the same as we sort of said before, if you're suffering with, you know, depression, anxiety, whatever it is the same as a physical illness. And I just really think we need to open the conversation and to talk about it. I know my dad, so I sorry if I'm jumping ahead, so I lost my dad to suicide 2 years ago, but that wasn't his first attempt. He had many attempts, I think maybe 3 in the 12 months leading up to that. And the earliest I kind of remember is when I was about 5 years old, so it's kind of been going on throughout my entire life. And I know he just didn't he just didn't talk about it with anybody.
Right.
You know, he ended up talking about it with me because of the work that I do.
Yeah.
And so he had attempted many times that I can remember throughout my lifetime. And what always was quite astounding to me is that, one, he didn't speak about it to his male friends or anyone really. But two, he was always so surprised when people cared, which is really interesting.
Wow.
And I really do think that comes back to us just opening the conversation, because if men were talking about their feelings and they felt more connected to their friendship groups, then maybe it wouldn't get to that point, because maybe they would talk about it earlier and they'd have a shared experience.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it's, as women, again, I don't want to generalise, but I think my experience of women has always been with my friends, that we've always like spoken about things. It's like, oh, I'm having trouble with this, or celebrating things. Like we're quite open and free is my experience, and I observe like Ahmed and his friends, and it's different, and my brothers and their friends, it's just different. There's a real, for me, I make real deep connections with people, especially women. I feel like I'm a woman's woman, because I think there's just something so special there that unless you've got friendships or those relationships where you can really build those strong relationships and those strong connections, you wouldn't understand. And I don't think there's anything as magical as like just supporting another woman and like hearing people's stories, which is why for me I wanted to start the podcast, was around, I think, growing up, without going too much on a tangent, growing up I was in an environment where girls were each other's competition, and it's like, but why? Why? It's a distraction. Let's all be awesome together, and if you're bright, it doesn't make me dull.
No.
So I think it's different for men. I do think it's changing a bit.
I'd hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I think the sector has a long way to go in terms of normalising the conversation and, you know, empowering help-seeking behaviour. But I do hope it's changing.
I hope so. Especially being a mum of a daughter and a son, like I really hope it's changing, and you can take active steps. Like he goes to the gym now 2 days after school, and it's like the other day was like, oh yeah, I had a tough day at school. Nothing in particular happened, but let's go to the gym. And it's those positive outlets. Like he might not want to talk, but it's something positive. So there's little things that we can plant in kids and change that narrative for sure.
100%.
To finish on a different note, the final question is, we often talk about self-care and the importance of self-care. One of the things that I definitely learned from you was about having a self-care plan and what that looked like, and not being afraid to talk about it, right? Because I think you can have a self-care plan and you do these things, but for me, when I saw yours, I was like, one, wow, she's prepared to share it with me. Like, how special is that? Two, I then went away and developed one myself. But three, it gave me so much confidence to share it with other people. And in an indirect way, it was also setting boundaries without me saying back off. It was a way of me saying back off, which I think is pretty magical. So where does self-care come from for you, and why is that so important?
I think for me, it is about having multiple things that set you up holistically in terms of positive mental health, first of all. And so as you've sort of touched on already, having different things. So what I would have shared with Ruth would have been my self-care platter, which is based on Dan Siegel's work. And so that sort of talks about, if you delve into something too much, it can actually be to your detriment. So for example, if you think about, you know, having a good night's sleep is of course going to set you up for positive self-care, but if you're sleeping 10-12 hours, that could potentially be depression, you know. And so it's about not just focusing on one thing. So with my self-care platter, I have, you know, physical movement, so yoga, you know, speaking with my family, doing silly ridiculous things with my wife, going skating or whatever, watching trash TV, having a good sleep. So really making sure that you've got lots of different things that are setting you up for success. But as you say as well, sharing that with different people. And something that I think is really important both in my personal and professional life is not just having that self-care plan and sharing it with different people, but actually having somebody that keeps you accountable. So something I call a self-care buddy. And I think similarly to what you were sort of saying before about I guess bringing that vulnerability into those relationships and empowering each other really. And so in our industry it is predominantly women, so finding another woman that you share your self-care plan with them and vice versa. And so then if something's not going on, something's not going well, that person can sort of say, hey Carly, do you think you should go for a walk at lunch today?
Yeah, nice.
Or have you had enough sleep lately? In a kind way, as opposed to a bit of an awkward, inefficient conversation.
Or something's going on and you might not want to talk about it.
So I think that's really positive. And then I suppose in terms of why I think it's important, I guess following the stresses that sort of come with supporting my dad through, I guess before his suicide, eventually, but also through his multiple attempts, there was a lot of stress, a lot of cortisol, all of that sort of stuff. And I think for a while being really conscious of those self-care activities was really helpful. I think it's easy to sort of say, I'll do yoga, but when it's visually on your desk or on your wall, it's inside and you can see it. And I think for me that kept me above water longer than it would have if I didn't have that. But then I suppose ultimately, after sort of working through that and developing my own anxiety, if I'm honest, supporting my dad through that journey and then processing the grief after losing him, eventually I got Bell's palsy. So for those that are watching that don't know what that is, it presents similarly to a stroke. It comes on quite suddenly. So for me, I think within 2 hours my face had completely dropped. I wasn't able to smile, I wasn't able to blink, and really that was my body saying, whoa, you're really stressed and we're literally paralyzed now because you just need a break. And I think not everyone's obviously going to get to that point, but that whilst I was promoting positive self-care before that, that was a real wake-up call for me,
I can imagine.
actually. Because like many of us do, we want to go to work and do the best job we can, and I'm not one that shies away from toil or getting a task done and meeting all my deadlines early and those sorts of things, and just pushing myself regardless of what was going on, regardless of what everyone around me was saying. And I think that diagnosis really refocused that for me and really put health back into perspective, that if you don't have your health, you actually don't have anything.
It's a real humbling experience, eh?
It really is. But I would say that experience also has pushed me further on my leadership journey too. I had a great team of leaders around me, and I was absolutely so grateful that they were able to step up and to continue supporting the vulnerable families and children that we worked with when I needed to take that time off. That was just amazing. And I think really working collaboratively and, as you said, empowering women and leading in different ways to enable them to be able to do that when I needed them was just incredible, and it truly has changed my relationship with them for the better since then.
That's amazing. I remember when you were first diagnosed, and I just remember just being like, what? Because I think I'd heard of it, but I don't know, in my head it wasn't what it actually is. In my head, I thought it was something like lymphedema, something like that.
Okay,
I was like, what is this? And then when you explained, I was like, wow, that's literally your body saying, hold, stop.
And I remember having a conversation with you, and at the beginning, I was barely able to talk, so I had to G myself up all day to speak with you for 5 minutes on the phone. And I remember you just being like, oh, I'm not sure what that is. How long do you think you'll be off? And I was like,
what does this mean?
It could be months.
And
it was wow, crazy.
So I came home and Googled, and I was like, oh, sugar. What? Like, far out.
But I think, it doesn't have to be as significant as a experience like that, but I think there's things that come up for everybody that really puts well-being back into focus, and it isn't just a buzzword. It's something that we should all be kind of talking about and encouraging each other to do, so that we don't get to that point. It is about the time with your family, and so looking at what is I guess a battery charger versus a battery drainer.
Yep.
And sort of saying, okay, is, you know, making cookies with my children, for example, is that going to charge me up or is that going to drain me? And working with it that way.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you. This will be our first episode of 2023, so really special. And I think, like I shared with you as well, on the anniversary of my mum's birthday, and it will be the first year, we've been running the podcast for a year.
Amazing.
So many milestones, so I couldn't think of a better person to have. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting me be part of your leadership journey. Like, it's been, we've only known each other for 2 years, but the growth that I've seen in that amount of time, like, Carley Thomas is a name that people need to look out for, because you're going to go on and continue to do some great things. So
thank you, Ruth.
Thank you for sharing your story with us.